Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about the methodology or the reasons behind why my videos are 3 to 5 minutes on average. It's a decision that really goes down to historical roots of oral storytelling. In fact, it goes back into the Aesop Fables era, where stories were deliberately meant to be short and to the point, to focus on the lessons. And that's really what I wanted to achieve in this process, to be able to get the lesson out without being bogged down in language or ideology or modern day constraints that would lose the importance of the message. And the history behind Aesop's Fables is actually quite interesting. It's not really so much of an individual, but a genre of this type of storytelling that has a rich history that goes back a very long ways. Aesop's Fables really didn't even start in Greece. The origin is actually much older, and in fact it comes from a term called Aesopica, which describes the entire oral tradition of what the story really was. And that is an important context when you look at the stories, because the way they were delivered was meant to be as uninflected as possible. Uninflected in this case means without emotion, without preconceived bias. Inflection or human emotion, even if it is not implied, can still impact the way the story is perceived. So in order for the lesson to be received without the influences of the emotion, the narrator or orator, as it was properly called, had to be able to remove their emotion from their speaking. Something that is very hard to do. Thankfully, modern day technology does assist with that, because in order to really understand the value of the fable, you have to remove the human emotion. That's really why Aesop's Fables did so well. They don't convey emotion because that would change the story. And the story itself is kept in a format that's meant to be quick and easy to digest. From the standpoint of the history, depending upon what sources you read, most sources put Aesop's Fable within the 620 to 554 BCE range. Now this is, of course, going way back. But there are other types of formats, storytelling methods, that fall under the same genre that go back further. And even within more recent modern, and I'm going to say modern as in the last 1,000 years, that technique continued through oral tradition. Much of the pre-ancestral knowledge was actually done specifically through this kind of teaching style. Get the lesson out there. Teach it. Let the student think about it for the day. But the lesson had to be short. It had to be on point. It had to be specific. One of the biggest fallacies within our own academic system now is a lot of the time classes are so long and so drawn out that by the time the student has sat through one full class, their brain is numb, they're no longer listening, and they're not able to actually focus on the content. As a teacher, I saw this quite often. When I worked in computer sciences and taught computer programming, I could see when students started checking out. I could visibly see it on their faces. And I realized throughout the course exactly how much information the majority of the class could handle before I was simply wasting my breath. My courses were typically either 40 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes, depending upon what day of the week they were scheduled. If it was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, then the courses were 40 minutes long. If it was a Tuesday, Thursday, then the courses were 1 hour and 20 minutes long. The problem with this is, on average, my experience for the kind of material I was teaching was after about 20 minutes of very dense technical discussions, students' faces just went blank. You could literally see the color drain out of them. They were past the point of being able to comprehend further material. It's not so much a weakness, it's not even a fault of the student. It's just the way the human brain functions. We are not machines, despite what the labor force likes to treat us like. There are limits to our reserves and our energies. That reality has to be taken into account with education. But the truth is that reality doesn't push money. So it's easier to treat humans as cattle and push them through the machine just to get those extra dollars, even though anybody with any level of reason knows these people don't remember much of anything. By the time that 1 hour, 20-minute session was over, or that 40-minute session was over, the students get 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe, before they have to move to their next class and start all over again with the same regiment. Now, if you're on a full 12-credit load, which was common for universities, by the time you got to the last class of your day, your brain was just baked. You didn't have the mental energy necessary to figure out what was going on within the course material. That was often very true and a very real problem for students trying to figure out how to arrange their courses. It made it difficult. It made it exhausting. And a lot of times, students suffered trying to keep up with that kind of hellish schedule. When I first started making this channel, I had a goal in mind, to talk about society without being canceled. Unfortunately, the modern world doesn't like actually showing a mirror at itself. But the thing of it is historically, that's always been true. And we can trace that back even throughout history, all the way back to Aesop's Fables and before. The lessons being taught, whether you want to talk about Nostradamus or whether you want to talk about Aesop, the period, the stories, the lessons. We could even go with Shakespeare as a good example. Anything that went against the narrative, whatever that narrative was usually harsh, and in most cases resulted in execution or exilement. We saw that with Socrates, we saw that with Galileo. Anything that disturbed the narrative. Censors were always everywhere looking for somebody to execute. Shakespeare's plays are a beautiful example of that. His stories were real world, right then and there news. His plays were a brilliant work. But because censors were always ready to cut his head off, he had to be careful what he said. Unfortunately, it's no different today. Today's world is just as restrictive as it was 1,000 or 2,000 or even 3,000 years ago. Those in power don't want the truth to come out because the truth always upsets the apple cart. That is the world we have always lived in. Those in power keep their power by silencing anybody that could threaten their power. That hasn't changed literally since the dawn of governance. any kind of control or a stabilization. And I talked about that in my last video regarding dark academia and exactly how dark academia was a control force to formalize education. And through that formalization, they were able to control the narrative, control the thought, control the direction the society went. This is just another step or another brick in that wall. So these stories, the length that I chose, was because I want my message to be heard. I want readers, listeners, to be able to take those stories, think about them, look around their world and see the parallels that are mentioned. But most importantly, I want you to be able to remember it. I could make a 30-minute video. YouTube would love it because they would get to run more advertisements. But it doesn't benefit you, the viewer. How much of what you are going to receive in that 30 minutes are you going to actually remember, especially after you've been pissed off by a flood of ads that don't even pertain to the content you're trying to watch? At least with a 3 to 5 minute video, YouTube will stick an ad in the beginning or in the end, but for the most part, nothing in the middle. You get the lesson without interruption. You can listen on your way to work. You can listen on your walk around the block. You can listen going up and down your flight of stairs in and out of your apartment. They're short enough that you can listen almost any time, but they're not taxing enough on your mind that you feel drained or exhausted afterwards. The lesson is the important part, and the delivery, the speech synthesizers, are because of my own health reasons, which I'm sure you can clearly hear in my voice and speaking, and by the time this video does get uploaded to YouTube, it will be butchered to high heavens, removing the gaps and silences between my words, the delayed speaking for my own respiratory and vocal issues. But the intent behind the technique, behind what Aesop, the Aesopica genre, wanted, was not for you to be influenced by my voice, by any emotion I might put into it inadvertently, but to be able to hear the lesson in a pure, constructive way, to be able to actually receive the lesson without intent. So that's why I chose this format, not to benefit YouTube and its advertisers, but to benefit you, my listener, so you can hear the story, reflect on the story, and not be overwhelmed by a video that you're not going to remember the beginning from the ending. Share your thoughts, leave a comment, let me know what you think. Help me grow this channel. Help me teach history in a way that's meaningful. Thank you for watching.